What does it mean to be a transformational leader in today's public schools? Well, that question has stayed with me for years. Not because it's difficult to answer in theory, but because it is profoundly difficult to live out in practice. And yet, it is the most important question any K-12 administrator or central office leader can sit with. Not just once or at the start of a new school year, but daily, in every decision, every conversation, every policy, and every moment when the pressure to simply manage things well tempts you away from the harder work of actually leading. Let me tell you about a moment that changed how I think about leadership. Early in my time as an assistant principal, I approached my role through the lens of control. My primary responsibility was student discipline, and I believed that maintaining order required me to hold the reins tightly. I made decisions largely on my own. I communicated directives more than I sought dialogue. I equated efficiency with authority. And for a season, things ran smoothly, at least on the surface. But beneath the surface, something was missing. Teachers felt managed, not empowered. Students were compliant, not inspired. And I was exhausted, carrying a weight that was never mine to carry alone. The shift came when I began to ask a different kind of question. So instead of, how do I keep things in order? I started asking, how do I build people up? That change in orientation from control to cultivation was the beginning of my transformation as a leader. And it is the very heart of what transformational leadership means in today's public schools. So let's talk about a common leadership trap. Because here is what I've observed in school systems across the country. Many administrators are extraordinarily skilled at management. They hit deadlines, manage budgets, navigate compliance requirements, and keep schools operationally sound, which is not a small feat. But management, even excellent management, is not the same as transformational leadership. The trap is believing it is. When we pour all of our energy into maintaining systems without simultaneously investing in the people inside them, we create schools that function but do not flourish. We produce compliance without commitment. We generate activity without a unified sense of purpose. James McGregor Burns, who first introduced the concept of transformational leadership, drew a sharp distinction between transactional leaders, those who operate on an exchange basis, and transformational leaders who elevate both the leader and the follower to higher levels of motivation and purpose. The public school landscape desperately needs more of the latter. You see, the tendency among well-meaning school leaders is to lean on positional authority rather than relational influence. They communicate vision through memos rather than conversations. They make decisions based on information, and they do this behind closed doors and then wonder why implementation stalls. They treat professional development as an event rather than a culture. They unintentionally signal to their teams that compliance is valued over creativity and that the safest choice is always the status quo. So, what does transformational leadership actually look like? I'm so glad you asked. Let's talk about what is the right approach. John C. Maxwell puts it plainly. Leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And in the context of public education, influence is built through genuine relationships, a compelling shared vision, and a commitment to growing the people entrusted to your care. You see, transformational leaders in K-12 schools are not defined by what they accomplish alone. They are defined by what they unleash in others. As Stephen Covey writes, the highest form of leadership is to trust and inspire, to see the potential in people before they see it in themselves, and then to create the conditions where that potential can emerge. This begins with self-awareness. You cannot lead others through transformation if you have not been willing to be transformed yourself. Carol Dweck's research on growth mindset is essential here. Leaders who believe that intelligence, ability, and character can be developed over time tend to foster the same belief in those they lead. Transformational school leaders are perpetual learners. They model vulnerability. They invite feedback. They sit in the discomfort of not having all the answers because they understand that certainty is not a prerequisite for courage. From that inner foundation, transformational leadership expands outward. It looks like a principal who restructures her schedule not to add another observation cycle, but to create space for meaningful coaching conversations with her teachers. It looks like a curriculum director who doesn't just mandate an instructional framework, but co-develops it with teachers, honoring their expertise and learning from them, as well as earning their trust. It looks like a superintendent who walks into a struggling school and asks, "What do you need from me?" and then actually listens to the answer. Research on the impact of school leadership confirms that these approaches are not just philosophically appealing, they are practically powerful. Leithwood and colleagues found that transformational leadership in schools has a significant positive impact on teacher motivation, teacher effectiveness, and ultimately, student achievement. The investment in people pays dividends that no policy document ever can. So let's talk about now the inner work that external results demand, because there is a price that goes along with this work. You see, there is a dimension of transformational leadership that rarely appears on professional development agendas. the inner work. Rory Vanden, in his work on self-discipline and focus, reminds us that the most significant investment we can make is in becoming the kind of person our vision requires. So for school leaders, this means doing the daily, unglamorous work of sharpening your emotional intelligence, clarifying your values, and aligning your daily actions with the deeper purpose that brought you into education in the first place. Remember, I said there was a price to pay. You see, as a former principal, I made it my goal to establish a culture of learning and growth, not just for students, but for every adult in the building. I expected growth from others because I was willing to demand it from myself first. I attended conferences, sought out mentors, read widely, and submitted myself to feedback that was sometimes, quite frankly, uncomfortable. That orientation changed everything about the way my team perceived my leadership. Transformational leaders do not ask their people to go somewhere they are not willing to go themselves. So I know you're wondering, what can you do? Well, if you are a K-12 administrator or central office leader reading this today, I want to challenge you with this. Don't just lead your school, transform it. Not through a new initiative or a restructured schedule, but through the daily intentional choice to see every person in your building as someone worth investing in. Start this week by having one conversation, not about data, not about compliance, but about a teacher's growth, a staff member's challenge, or a student's potential. Ask the question behind the question. So listen longer than feels comfortable. Then commit to showing up that way again and again and again until it becomes the culture. Because here is what I know to be true after years of leading in and alongside schools. When leaders are transformed, schools are transformed. And when schools are transformed, students thrive. When students are well led, they learn well. Now, I want to hear from you. What is one shift you can make this week to lead more transformationally in your school or district?